Good morning, my fellow metalheads. It is a brisk, kind of cool morning here in South Carolina, so might try to make this a little quick. Anyway, welcome to another episode of Metal Sanctuary, and today I'm going to do the band review and worst to first in sections of Judas Priest. Judas Priest, after Black Sabbath, is my second favorite heavy metal band. I got into Judas Priest probably around maybe 1999. Of course, I had heard of them before. The song "Breaking the Law" was on MTV before, and that was kind of like one of their more accessible tracks, so to speak. And when I'd already got into metal, this wasn't what I thought was really metal, so I kind of threw it on the back burner and really didn't think about it. And then I ended up getting a compilation called "Living After Midnight," and then I just immediately fell in love with the band. It had, I think it started off with Green Manalishi, and then had live versions of Tyrant, Victim of Changes. Also had Hellion Electric Eye, Freewheel Burning, stuff like that, and that just immediately got me into the band. Um, I've been a fan of the band ever since. Regretfully, I've never got a chance to see them live. Was hoping to get the chance when they were on a Ozfest bill, and it never materialized for me. But anyway, the main reasons I love this band is because of number one, Rob Halford's or Halford, however you want to pronounce it, his vocal style. I mean, just the high soaring vocals, and especially later in their career and also in his solo career, even though his high vocals have taken a turn downward, his low vocals have gotten a whole lot better, and I think really complement his overall vocal style. Like especially on the album Nostradamus, I think he really brings his full vocal range into Spectrum. Second reason is I think probably the best metal guitar duo ever in Glenn Tipton and KK Downing. I think their blend of different style of soloing, where Tipton is more of a technical guitarist, and KK is more of the feel and the passion. I think they complement each other really well. So let's dive into the discography of worst to first. Now, I've taken a page from my buddy Metal Ron, who has done some of his worst to first in sections. The only other worst to first I've done was Megadeth, and um, their style changed a little bit here and there, kept a lot of the same things in there. So doing them worst to first all the way through really wasn't a big deal. But I think with Priest, there was a huge change between their 70s and their 80s and later work. So let's dive into worst to first from the 70s. 70s worst Rock-a-Rolla. It's more of kind of like just a heavy hard rock album, not really a metal album. I do think it's underappreciated. Songs like Cheater, I think, is a really good song. But as far as it being like one of their heaviest albums, it doesn't really come close to anything they would do later. The next one, just kind of almost sounds like it's going to go in chronicle order. Anyway, that record came out in '74. The second record, Sad Wings of Destiny, is next up, which came out in 1976. While a lot of people think that's where they really define their metal sound, I kind of disagree. I think you've got songs like Island of Domination, which you know doesn't really lend itself to being really more metal. They've got like a couple of slower like ballad type things on there. Victim of Changes obviously is a classic. I prefer the live version. I think the lead guitar work is in the beginning a lot faster, and to me it just sounds better live. Obviously you've got The Ripper, which is another classic song, Tyrant, Genocide. But I think just like overall, I don't think it really completely got them into being really more metal. The next one up, 77, Sin After Sin, which for a long time I actually did consider to be my favorite Judas Priest record. It was the first Priest CD I ever bought, and the cover was just to me, I think, really struck me. And then you've got songs like The Sinner, and then their cover of Diamonds and Rust, which was a more faster cover and originally done by Joan Baez. Um, for the longest time, it was my favorite, and then I've gotten other albums more into consideration. I think it was really my favorite just because it was the first one for the longest time. But I can't change my mind. I'm not completely hard-headed and stubborn. Next, 78 slash 79, depending on which country it was released in. Hellbent for Leather slash Killing Machine. Obviously, you've got the songs like Hellbent for Leather and you know, uh, Evil Fantasies and Delivering the Goods. You know, just a really solid record where they got even heavier, and that's when they actually brought out the actual leather and studs and whips and stuff like that to actually create the initial heavy metal uniform, so to speak. But for me, 1978 Stained Class is, I think, top to bottom, their best record from the 70s. You've got Exciter, Heroes End, Beyond the Realms of Death, which I think, like if you compare it to like their earlier epic songs, I think it stands even higher than Victim of Changes, in my opinion. Cover of Better by You Than Me, a really good song, which they eventually would come under fire for in the courts for a double attempted suicide, which they were exonerated from. So that's 70s. 80s, let's go worst. Turbo. This should come as no surprise to most metal fans. In fact, the only song I even like on that album is Turbo Lover. I don't even have the rest of the record. I just have that one song. That came out in 1986. 1981, Point of Entry. I think it's a really good record, and with the 80s albums, I don't think there's a whole lot you can really say in to really insult the 80s work, really, other than Turbo, because it had kind of like what people might think the glam. I think it's more of just like a mainstream sound. I don't necessarily feel it as being glam. But Point of Entry, you got Head Out to the Highway, Desert Plains, Solar Angels is one of my favorite Priest songs. You got Hot Rockin's a really good tune. Next up, Ram It Down, 1988. Great record. I'm a Rocker, great song. The title track, Ram It Down, I mean, to me, that's one of Halford's best screams on a record. You got heavy metal, Hard as Iron, just great songs on that album. They do kind of have that cover of Johnny Be Good that a lot of people they're not too hip on. I like it, actually. But I think that for a lot of people that kind of brings the record down a bit. Next up, 1980, British Steel. This is their first really kind of get into the mainstream commercial record with songs like Living After Midnight and Breaking the Law. But, you've got songs like Metal Gods and Grinder. The Rage is a really good song. Steeler is a very underrated song. Not a lot of people, put in like their top list of Priest songs. A really good record. After that, 1982, Screaming for Vengeance. You've got the title track, obviously, Hellion Electric Eye, which is, for the longest time, was their staple for opening up concerts. And, they've actually deviated from that in recent years, but I think they probably should go back to it. I mean, it's just such an awesome intro with the Hellion going into Electric Eye. You'd think of Rob Halford coming out and he's got the sunglasses on and that little biker hat and, if you've ever watched the 82 Memphis show, it kind of, that's what you think about when you hear that song. Also, Devil's Child, a really good song on there. What else is on that record? A couple of songs that kind of bring that down. Pain and Pleasure brings it down a little bit. The next one became my favorite 80s Priest and my second favorite Priest record over the last few years. 1984, Defenders of the Faith. Really only kind of song on there is Heavy Duty. Other than that, I mean, you've just got bombastic sound throughout the whole record. I think the peak of Rob Halford's, at least the 80s scream, and probably even overall, really. You got Free Will Burning, a great song. Heads Are Gonna Roll. You know, Rock Hard, Ride Free is a great song. My personal favorite Priest song, The Sentinel, just great song. So that's for the 80s. For the 90s, let's go with 2001, Demolition. This is, to me, the second worst Priest record. Got a couple of good songs, but just overall, this is the second record they would do, and the last record they would do with Tim Ripper Owens on vocals. Just really not, following the first one, there was just a lot that was lacking on that record. 1997, Jugulator is next up, and it's a great record, top to bottom. And you got Jugulator, Cathedral Spires, which is my favorite off the album. Burn in Hell is a great song. Death Row, great song. Brain Dead, Dead Meat. I mean, the list. I mean, I could just name you all the songs. They're just great. Next up for me, 2008 concept record, Nostradamus. This is where I feel Rob Halford really gave a lot of that more operatic style, which I think is about the only way you can really do a concept album in Priest, where you go from the high pitch and the low pitch, and like especially the title track, Nostradamus, I think just shows off his entire vocal range right there. Great songs like the title track, Nostradamus. There are some, slower songs, but I mean, you're delving into the life and history of one person, and so you're going to look at the trials and tribulations of that person. Great record. 2014, which is the most latest release, Redeemer of Souls. This album, I mean, it just kicks ass. Period. I mean, it's pure Priest, what you would expect, following. Anything like Painkiller or whatever, just a great record. This is the first one they did without KK Downing, who quit the band, basically saying, I've got nothing left to prove, I've got other stuff I want to do with my life, and as much as a fan I am that I hate that he left, I can respect it. It's not like he left after like 4 albums. I mean, they put out God knows how many records at that point. But you can tell his songwriting is missed in there. Richie Faulkner, replaces him. Doesn't do a very bad job. But you can just feel, kind of like, with any band that has a guitarist switched late in their career. Like, I'm not comparing necessarily. I'm just kind of doing like example given here, like with Slayer, their latest record. You can just tell that Jeff Hanneman is not writing on this album. But anyway. Redeemer of Souls is a really good album. Next up for me, second in the 90s to present, 2005's Angel of Retribution, the return of Rob Halford. Songs like Demonizer, Judas Rising, the opening track. I mean, really, other than Hellion Electric Eye, that would probably be the only other one you should suggest that Priest open an album with.
Go down, Sim.
And that leads us to the number 1 from the 90s and present, Painkiller. And the title track, probably my second favorite Priest song. Painkiller album being my favorite Priest album. I mean, you've just got Between the Hammer and the Anvil, great song. I mean, the whole record. I mean, if you know anything about Painkiller or Judas Priest, I mean, that's got to be the number 1. So anyway, that is my worst to first and band review of Judas Priest. Like, comment, subscribe. Stay metal. God bless.